This is a presentation from the Supernaut Network.
Joining us now on the show, the writer and director of the iconic science fiction film Tron, Steven Lisberger. Steven, thanks so much for taking some time today to talk to us.
My pleasure.
You know, I guess one of the great ironies of making Tron is that you were kind of limited to what technology could do for you or what you could do with the technology you had. But looking back now, what do you think was the biggest limitation from you from a technological standpoint?
Well, people don't realize how limited our ability was to work with computers visually. We really didn't have any real-time graphics. So, for instance, when the guys doing computer graphics worked on their machines, they could never play any of the images as a film. They could only look at individual frames one at a time. And they couldn't send me any footage. They would take Polaroids of the computer screen images and send me through the mail Polaroids of what was on the computer screen. And it was only when the computer had a motion picture camera aimed at the screen and like animation, each individual frame would res up on the computer screen and we'd collect a picture of it. Now, for many of those frames, it took hours and hours for the computer to put that one frame on the screen. So to take one little sequence from the light cycle, for instance, might take 2 days of laboriously clicking individual frames with a camera aimed at the computer screen. And when that film was processed and we looked at it, that would be the first time anyone saw any of the computer animation actually move.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about limitations. Yeah.
It was just crazy. I mean, there was no digital film per se. There was only the ability to create a digital image. But there was no ability to see anything move.
That's unbelievable.
People don't realize how much work the artists did on Tron trying to imagine all of this stuff, and the tools didn't really exist to interact with the program. So it got totally arcane. I mean, they would work for days with charts and grids, figuring out where each one of the light cycles would be, and they'd have to enter every single bit of information by hand. So if the computer was on one square and then it moved to another square on the grid, the computer didn't even have the ability to fill in that frame automatically between those two frames. It needed the actual information for where it would be, even if it was only 1 foot further along.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God.
It was hell. But it was exciting because we knew we were, pioneering this technology. And that actually, that means a lot. You get excited about that, and there's also a thrill with knowing that what you're coming up with can't really be compared to anything else.
Right.
And so even though it's creatively dangerous, it's kind of liberating to know that, I won't be compared to this other sequence in this other film. If you look at what's happened with computer graphics now, it's unbelievably competitive. Every company is saying, oh, we can do hair and it looks like that, or we can do, explosions and they look like this. But you're going to be compared to a lot of other films, no matter what visual you're working on.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. The other problem was, of course, the fact that we there was no technology to map the characters into the environment.
Right.
We couldn't do blue screen, and it was because blue screen only at the time was efficient if you were doing a small number of shots. And, people would do blue screen, and they'd have, at the time, if you said you had 50 blue screen shots in a movie, that was a lot. Well, we had over 1,000 shots where our actors had to be in an environment that didn't exist. And the only way one could tackle that was to do what we did, which was to literally make a blow-up frame the size of a placemat of every single frame of the electronic world, and then treat it like an animated movie. Because that's where we were at Disney Studios for a reason, which was that they could, if we took a live-action movie and broke it down into individual frames, like pieces of artwork, Disney could handle doing hundreds of thousands of images and then consolidating them, compositing them on vertical animation stands. So the irony was we were using very tried and true, traditional old school technology, but by changing the look so it was glowing and looked like computer graphics, it looked like it was cutting edge in terms of visuals, but the way it was made was the exact opposite.
Well, yeah, you guys didn't use the blue screen. You used the black screen.
Yeah, we shot it on a black stage, and the characters were in white, and then 75,000 individual 70 millimeter frames were blown up.
Unbelievable.
And there were stacks and stacks of them. I mean, there were 75,000 key individual frames, but every frame had about 10 secondary frames that were dedicated to the different aspects of that frame. So, for instance, the color scheme or the discs, all of those things also had an additional frame that went with the master frame that controlled that. So I think the average frame of Tron had, something like at least 10 additional pieces of art. So at the end, we ended up with, about 750,000 pieces of art.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it all had to be composited, but that technology existed. We had, I think it was 13 animation stands, and we went around the clock, and we actually did all the effects on the first Tron in approximately 9 months. And on Tron Legacy, it took over 18 months. So what's interesting about that is that the technology that we have now, which is so monumental, didn't go any faster than the sort of, World War II technology that we used at Disney Studios that was, from the 40s.
Nice. So I got to ask you real quick, being in that black environment day in and day out, did that take a psychological toll on anybody?
I think it was the first film I'd ever made. I mean, I went to film school, but I'd never made anything longer than about 5 or 10 minutes, short films. I have to say I kind of dug it. I liked the fact that it every day felt in a way like a blank canvas. And the black, the actors were always in white, and certainly skin tones in that environment. I mean, it looked amazing because, you'd see Bruce and Cindy and Jeff, and it was like a Shakespearean play. It was like a moment from Hamlet when it was very dramatic, with just a dark background and a spotlight on the actors. So that was kind of what it felt like. It felt like we were putting on some strange, almost medieval play to deal with all that blackness. The funny part was that even though the stage was all black, we had to use an insane amount of light to illuminate the actors themselves to the point where we had enough detail because we needed all those circuit lines, and we needed to see every little bit of their bodies with no shadows so we could do what we had to do with the color. And at one point, we were on stage 4 at Disney, and we had all the lights on the ceiling. And at one point, the lights flickered, and a couple minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and some technicians had come, and they said we had actually blown the fuses on the city of Burbank. I'm not kidding. We browned out Burbank because we were using so much electricity.
Oh, man.
Which is ironic when it's called Tron, you know. It would have to do with that.
Oh, you guys shut down the MCP there, and then
Yeah.
You know, it's so great. I mean, Tron is such a part of video game culture, and how much video game culture has changed to a degree. And it all started though with a game of Pong. What was it about Pong that really fascinated you?
Well, I think what happened in my head at the time was that when I saw the little geometric shapes that were used for video games, it made me think that, well, I flashed back to art school and how, you know, when you learn how to draw, one of the ways you learn how to draw is, you know, you make a square for the head, and you make a cylinder for the abdomen, and, you know, cylinders for the legs, and you learn anatomy by compositing geometric shapes. And then after a while, and you do that with animal drawing and buildings too. And, you know, after that, you then move on to those little wooden figures that have curves in it. But you start with those geometric block forms. And when I saw these geometric shapes, because I had done so much drawing, I realized, well, if they can do that, then it's only a matter of time before they're creating human-like characters. And if you just start reducing the sizes of all the little geometric shapes, eventually you could create something that's, you know, somewhat realistic, or at least, you know, cartooning. So right from the beginning, the first time I saw Pong, I felt confident that this was going to rapidly become much more real. And part of the irony is that it felt really cool in its sort of crude early day forms, you know, and I had this, people used to say, well, one day this is all going to be indistinguishable from reality, which is where we are now. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this is like a magic time right here where the limitations of this medium are a really cool look, and those limitations are going to disappear.
Right.
So I really liked how graphic it all was, and I think everybody who looks at those graphic styles from back in the 80s remembers that sort of nostalgia for how simple it was, and now it's, you know, we know it's completely indistinguishable. One thing that, you know, I haven't talked about much before, but you guys might dig hearing this, is that there's been all this biographical material on Stephen Jobs since his death, and the books that are published. And they talk about, one of the things they talk about is how Stephen Jobs visited Xerox PARC, and that is where he learned about the mouse and graphic user interface, and also in terms of screen graphics. He got a lot of stuff from Xerox PARC. And I found out not too long ago from a consultant who ran Xerox, one of the divisions at Xerox PARC, his name was Alan Kay, that the first two visitors he got were Stephen Jobs and me, because I visited Xerox PARC too. And we were there within a month of each other. And, obviously Stephen Jobs benefited from seeing all of that, and it inspired him to take Apple in a new direction. And it inspired me, but completely on an artistic level. And the scene where Dillinger is talking to the MCP, and he's got his big black desk, and it's a giant touch screen, and he's moving the images around on the touch screen. I mean, people look at that and they go, "Oh yeah, it's a touch screen." But if you put that in the context of 1982, it's literally off the charts crazy. Right. There was no such thing. No person had ever manipulated a touch screen other than at Xerox PARC.
Wow.
So it's funny, one puts these things in, and it's almost as if they come true, then people today look at the film and go, well, of course, it's a touch screen. And the funny part is it's only if you get it wrong that it really stands out. So, you look at Blade Runner now and you say, well, weren't we supposed to have flying cop cars by 2014? So that stands out, but Dillinger's touchscreen desk is just like, yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Well, another funny aspect of it, too, is the whole concept of digitizing humans. You had that in your film, and now you are literally digitizing humans for movies.
Yeah, well, that's just too crazy. I mean, there are surreal moments, I have to tell you, when, they have trucks, that scan you so that they can drive to the studios or drive to location and scan you on location. And so there's Jeff Bridges doing a Tron film, and he goes into the trailer to be digitally scanned, and now it's in real time. So they scan him, and boom, there he is as a digital character. And it's exactly, the mechanism that we fantasized about all those years ago. It's very strange.
Well, Steven, I got to ask, there's been a lot said about this from people that aren't you, but I want to know why the film changed plans from the good programs glowing yellow and the bad ones blue over to blue and red.
Well, we went back and forth on the color scheme several times, and again, it was very tough because we could not paint or do sample artwork of the final look of the film, no matter, because of a couple reasons. One is that it was the look we were going for was so intermingled with the new and the old technology that there was a certain amount that was unknown. We weren't totally sure what we were going to end up with in terms of the look through the process we were using. So we could only approximate what we thought it might end up looking like. And so there was this sense looking at the artwork that, that even if we picked something now, we could find out later that the colors were different because they were coming from out of the computer or because of the backlighting. And we did a lot of pre-production art, and we liked, how emotional the red was, and we worried about the duration of this look. I mean, as it was, you have to remember that some people were just completely overwhelmed by the look of Tron, particularly, the parents of some of who took their kids to Tron 1. It was just too much. The kids loved it, but they found it too much. So I think we felt that we weren't that interested in yellow. It was pretty much always blue versus red. And we felt that even though red was more emotional, the blue was easier to look at and easier to be with. So we decided to stay with, blue characters. And I mean, in a way, it was almost like a blue jean kind of thing. And so, I mean, that's my recollection of how that went down. Again, it was pretty much a journey into the unknown. And when the film came together, where there really was no time or money to make changes. Compared to today, where things are so fluid because of, the advances in digital filmmaking, changes are made repeatedly right to the end of the whole process. And because we're working digitally today, there's no lag time. What you film on the set, you can see. And, the computer graphics are so fast that you almost get real-time feedback on how these things are going to composite. And when we made Tron, it was all on, cellular film. I mean, it was an overnight process. Everything you shot, we didn't even have video assist when we shot the live action. So you would shoot something, and it would, you wouldn't see it till the next day. And when we were doing special effects, we really couldn't start experimenting with the special effects until we had the whole production capability organized, and that took months. So I think we locked the movie in its entirety after the live action shoot within 3 weeks. So I shot the film in black and white. 3 weeks later, I locked it completely. I mean, you're supposed to have 12 weeks to do a rough cut, but this movie was locked 3 weeks after shooting stopped, and basically there were never any changes after that.
Wow.
And when we had to do some reshoots on special effects shots just because there were some strange errors, but that was rare. So as crazy as the system was, it was really pretty efficient because so many of the shots in the movie were never changed. They were shot the first time, and they were put in the film.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so
that's so amazing. Yeah.
Well, the thing that I'm very aware of is how different people work today than back then. I mean, I have he's almost 30 years old, my son Carl, and sometimes we talk about the work he does and the work I do, and I realize that it's so, the ability to manipulate information now is a major necessity, and to watch him on his computer it can be mind-boggling for me. And there is a tendency, I think, today to think that one is always one click away from the answer. That if I click, I've clicked this many times, and if I click once more, this next screen that comes up is going to get me really close to the answer, whatever the problem is. And that is a contemporary point of view. I mean, it was much more sort of shut your eyes and point into the darkness and hope that where you're pointing is close to where you'll end up.
Oh, man.
Now,
yeah, it's a big change.
Now, I guess one of the key elements that I find to the movie is the light cycle. I mean, because the light cycle just, to me, truly just represents the combination of man and machine. That is really key to it. That's
exactly right.
Was that an element from the start when you were thinking about it, or did you have an aha moment? Or
no, the light cycle was, we knew it was cool, But it's one of the surprises. I didn't know that it would become an iconic symbol of man literally integrated into the machine. And that's been a surprise. It's a good surprise, and I think certainly the contributions of all the artists to the light cycle made a big difference. I mean, Sid Mead's original design is just, wonderful, and the work that Bill Croyer and Jerry Reese put into the light cycle sequence and Magi. I can remember vividly the first time I saw any footage from the light cycle, and it was a window into another dimension. I mean, we were all shocked at how compelling it was. But at that point, we were more shocked at the totality of the whole scene, not the light bike itself. And but that has really become a symbol. And, fortunately, I mean, Joe Kaczynski's really into motorcycles. And he has, really pushed the light cycle, in a great direction. And now Disney's got their Shanghai Disney park, and there's a light cycle ride being built in Shanghai, China, where you go on an actual light cycle and you go 55 miles an hour.
Jeez.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I haven't gone there yet, but it's still almost a year away from completion. But you're inside a dark building, but then you emerge outside. It's like a roller coaster, but you're sitting on a light cycle. And when you're in the darkness, the environment around you is all projected scenes from a Tron world. And then when you go outside, there's sort of an enormous tent which covers acres. The entire tent is made out of LEDs.
Whoa.
Oh.
And so then 55 miles an hour, you're on this roller coaster and you're moving through this tent environment where the whole sky is brilliant LEDs. So I've seen a simulation of the ride. It looks pretty amazing. So yeah, the light bike has turned into this icon of us integrated with our technology.
It's amazing.
Yeah, who knew?
Now, if I recall correctly, your plan way back was to make Tron an independent film, right?
Yeah, I had a small company called Lisberger Studios, and we had done an animated piece for the 1980 Olympics. We had done TV specials for Don Ohlmeyer at NBC, and then we did a half an hour on the Winter Games and an hour on the Summer Games, and that footage from that animation was going to be cut into the Olympics, and then it was also going to run as 2 TV specials, and then the two were roughly slapped together, and it became this, mini feature film, even though it wasn't ever designed to run in that length. But then the Olympic boycott happened, and which Jimmy Carter now says was a mistake, and that sort of, was a shot below the waterline for the studio. Parts of it still aired, but there was a lot of, blowback during the Olympic boycott to anything that was connected to the Olympics. I must have been terrible to be an Olympic athlete at that time. And we were going to try to roll the momentum of Animal Olympics into trying to make Tron as an independent, but with Animal Olympics in trouble, we couldn't do that. So at that point, we needed help, and it was really sort of felt like fate that we ended up at Disney Studios. It was Tom Wilhite, a very young guy. I think he was 30. I was 30, and he was in charge of the film division. And Tom has told me over the years, jokingly, it was a good thing I didn't know more about the film business, because if I had, I would have said no to Tron. And but it was great being at Disney Studios. At that point, there were still some of the old timers from, you know, the days of Walt, and so you got stories and one of the old timers told me while we were making Tron, and it seemed, you know, so flipped out that there were so many unknowns. He said, it felt more like the original Disney days. He said, you know, people look back at Disney Studios now and it seems like everything they did was inevitable and worked out so well. But he said that working at the studio back then, in the old days, he said there was a feeling of excitement mixed with a little bit of anxiety and dread, because they were advancing the technology as fast as they could go, and they were never really sure how these films were going to turn out. So that was interesting, and you know, it made us feel like part of that tradition.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they didn't know everything about animation when they first started, so it was very much like you guys, just figuring it out as you were going.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what artists are supposed to do, right?
Right.
You know,
yeah.
you know, it's not medicine. Lives aren't at stake. You know what I mean? You know, you can experiment, and that's, you know, so artists should be bold, I think.
Now, speaking of a bold artist, one of my favorite, you know, comic book artists is Mobius, and
yeah,
you got him involved. Was there a specific comic that you said is like, I need this guy
involved? Well, you know, we all loved Mobius, you know, all the way back. I mean, how could you not? You know, heavy metal and Airtight Garage. I mean, and then I got to know Mobius, and he's just amazing. He he passed away a couple years ago, which was really kind of upsetting, because on many levels, one of which is he was such a pure spirit. He was just a white light, and you're just like, ooh, you know, aren't those guys supposed to live forever? I hope. And but he made a big impression on me, and he helped me a lot. He did a lot of storyboarding on the film, and he didn't have a problem with how all the fantasy aspects that were uncertain, he just waded right into that. And one of the crazy things about Mobius, which people didn't expect and know, was he was in some ways the fastest artist any of us had ever seen. There were a lot of, you know, really good draftsmen and storyboard people at Disney, and people that worked with me that came from Lisberger Studios, but they were all pretty shocked when they sat in the same room with Mobius and realized, oh man, this guy turns this stuff out like lightning, and it's really, really amazing stuff. So I had Mobius and I had Sid Mead. I mean, what more could you ask
great
for?
Team, yeah. Great team there.
And the funny part is how they switched back and forth. I mean, I originally thought that it would be Sid that would be doing the mechanical aspects and the light cycle, and then Mobius would be doing the costumes. But then it started to shift, and Mobius did a set of costumes, and they really weren't working for us. And then so Sid went ahead, and it was actually Sid Mead who designed the main approach to how we were going to handle the costumes. And then conversely, you know, Sid was struggling with some of the more mechanical aspects, like the Solar Sailor, and Mobius ended up designing that, which I never would have anticipated. So they got along great. We had amazing artists on the film.
That's really cool. Just really cool. So, Steven, I want to know, just, you know, personal question here. What kind of computer does the man that created Tron use?
I just have, it's nothing spectacular. I mean, if you want to know the truth, my wife Peggy is way more the computer tech person in the house than I am. And, it's funny. I continue to be fascinated by computers on the theoretical level. So I do try to keep up. I just read the Google book in the Plex, the Steven Levy book, and I do try to keep up with advances in AI, and the singularity, and also digital biology, light at the speed of life. So I'm really interested on the theoretical cutting edge, but I'm actually not all that intrigued or fluent with, the apps on my iPhone. And my wife is the exact opposite, so it works out. So, yeah, I'm embarrassed to say it, but, every 2 days I hand my wife my phone and say, will you help me with this?
I do that to my 2-year-old daughter. Don't feel bad.
Yeah.
she can swipe the screen better than I can.
So you tell me where all this is going. I certainly didn't anticipate this, that there was going to be. Well, it's funny. I mean, when I think about how so many people back in the early '80s said, oh, we're opposed to computers and technology. And then to see, those people or that whole mindset disappear suddenly, and everybody is carrying around. A cell phone probably has, 1,000 times more computing power in it than millions than we used on all of Tron. I mean, it's ridiculous. In Tron Legacy, one frame from the new light cycle sequence, you could pick any frame, used more computing power than we used in the entire movie of Tron.
Jeez.
Wow. One frame.
Man. Oh, that's insane.
It is.
I mean, we were in a sandbox, okay? That's where we were, with the little plastic bucket and the little plastic shovel.
Oh, so, it took 30 years to get a follow-up to the original. Now, there's rumors, you don't have to substantiate them, but there's rumors that there's going to be a third. Are we going to see it within 25 years?
Well, I certainly hope so, believe me, because, you calculate my age and add another 25 years, the number's too high. I would like to say that, yes, I'm very optimistic that we are going to see it sooner rather than later.
Nice. So, Steven, just one last question here. I got to know. I love movies, all kinds. I want to know the Master Control Program versus Hal. Yeah. Who's a bigger badass?
Well, I'm a big fan of Stanley Kubrick's work, so I always sort of, my instinct is to bow down to that. But I like the way the MCP was a juicer. If you think about it, it's like one of those fruit and vegetable juice machines. He put them up against the wall and spun it, and all of their information was just extracted. I like that, and I also like the fact that the MCP. One can say, and it's true, that the MCP, that talking head, is not realistic and it's graphic, is really the first computer character, acting character in cinema. And it's funny because, even though he's just a face, people tend not to think of him as a character, because I guess he doesn't walk around and have arms and legs. But he really is the first. And I really like the MCP, and in a way I kind of miss him, but I have a feeling I don't know when he'll be back, but in a way I have a feeling he's never really left.
Ooh, awesome.
It's the collective mind, and one thing that is certainly undeniable is that we have pooled all our minds through the digital realm. And that's a very, MCP kind of approach to consciousness, the pooled mind that works in real time. So,
very cool.
Very
Hey, Steven, really, thank you for the time today. Really
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Nice talking to you guys. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you, Steven.
Thanks, Steven.
All right, call me after we get Tron 3 going.
Absolutely. Totally.
Okay.
Take care,
Do well,
man.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.